Welp, I think it's time that I stop complaining about a lack of arcade racing games in this console generation. The genre definitely was in a slump for a little while, but with games like Horizon Chase Turbo, Dangerous Driving, Wipeout Omega Collection, Team Sonic Racing, and plenty of others, I think I can probably ease off of that complaint a bit, at least for now. Crash Team Racing is the newest addition to that genre, and it throws its Wumpa fruits into the ring with relatively unique track designs, power-ups, and those Crash Bandicoot characters that it was so well known for 20 years ago on the PS1. Even though not all of those elements make it through the time warp in one piece. Full disclosure, I wasn't the biggest fan of CTR back in the 90s. Not because I had any major problems with it or anything, but if I wanted to get my racing fix back then, I was far more likely to pop in a copy of Wipeout or the absolutely flawless Jet Moto 2. So the nostalgia factor for CTR Nitro-Fueled has very little impact on the experience for me. I'm primarily looking for a good racing game here, not just a $40 trip down memory lane. Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled definitely does its own thing in a number of ways, and it sticks out in the kart racing genre as a result, for better and for worse. And not all of those elements work out in 2019, in my opinion, but I'll start with the things that I do like. The driving itself, for instance, has definitely been tuned up a little bit from the original. I actually played the original for a little while to compare, and yeah, the changes are subtle, but it's definitely better in this new version. CTR definitely controls its own kind of way, and it has a great sense of what it is. And when it goes well, it goes really well. CTR has pretty much all of the modes you would expect from a good kart racer right now. Cup races, challenge modes, online racing, offline multiplayer. So content-wise, the game does a very good job. I also like the graphics quite a bit. The Crash characters look as alive as they ever have, with very dense fuzzy fur and big rubbery faces that are super emotive. It all looks really great, and many of the tracks are just outstanding and insanely pretty to look at. I mean, look at this. I was a little surprised to see that the game is locked at 30 frames a second though, even on the PS4 Pro. But I suppose the trade-off with that is extremely consistent performance, which CTR has, and I always appreciate that, especially in a racing game. Now, if you watch any reviews from before or right after the game launched, odds are you heard some complaints about the online multiplayer stability. And those complaints were definitely warranted at the time, but now that it's been out for a couple of weeks, it's seen a patch or two, I think it's mostly been smoothed over. It's definitely not perfect, but I would consider the online stability to be acceptable most of the time now. As far as the recreation of the music goes, it's fairly straight down the line, and the songs are remade pretty much note for note, much like they were in the Insane Trilogy. Although, unlike the Insane Trilogy, you can swap back to the original tracks if you want. That, on top of the ability to apply retro skins to the karts and the characters, definitely underlines Beenox's appreciation for the source material. And that's something I always like to see in a remake like this. Speaking of customization, there's plenty of it, which is nice, although none of it actually really affects your character's driving stats, which is more than a little unfortunate for me, as I think having some way for players to nudge their favorite character towards their own racing style has been pretty standard in this genre for a while now. So for there to be no real way to do that in CTR makes the customization feel pretty shallow and mediocre. So all you really have in the way of driving variety is choosing between the 3 different types of racers who have stats that are locked to those racers. Games like Team Sonic Racing that allow you to tweak your stats create a far more compelling experience in my opinion. And both of these games are the same price, by the way. Where CTR's customization is superior to TSR's, however, is the method in which you purchase the items that you want. You find the items you want and you buy them with the coins that you earn in gameplay. Now for the major complaints. The game is definitely more difficult than it lets on, which isn't necessarily a problem on its own, but unfortunately that's combined with being forced to focus so much on exploiting every single little opportunity for every possible inch of advantage that the racing itself kind of takes a back seat a lot of the time. CTR tries to take fun racing and add its own flavors to it, but instead it just creates a pile of too many elements to keep track of. You have to find and use every little bump in the road that gets you a boost, memorize the very dated track designs, 90-degree angle turns and all, and of course constantly finagle your way through the drifting itself, which requires 3 button presses to really take advantage of. All of this while hoping that you don't get nailed by a bowling bomb, which will almost certainly send you all the way to the back of the pack thanks to the rubber banding. Now, I could still find my way to excusing most of this if it wasn't required to completely master all of that to get very much of anywhere in the game. This game basically takes the qualifications to becoming a speedrunner and makes them required to advance, and while I was able to do that, I noticed that by the time I got that good, it didn't feel as much like a fun kart racing game as it did a constant test of my ability to exploit and manipulate the tracks. Now, different players with different styles will certainly have varying opinions on this, and some people might even enjoy all of these layers of things to master and keep track of, but for me, it was just too much to cram into a kart racing game while still allowing the experience to breathe a little. Crash Team Racing Nitro-Fueled isn't a game I would say is for everybody, and I wouldn't even say it's for everyone that likes kart racers. So I can't really recommend it the same way I would recommend Dangerous Driving or Team Sonic Racing or Jet Moto 2. Beanox definitely nailed it from a remake standpoint, but the game itself just still isn't that great, and no amount of new visuals can really hide or fix that. And this is a prime example of why I prefer brand new games over remakes and remasters of old ones. You can only tweak an old game so much before you have to make a choice between losing the soul of the original and just accepting the flaws of it. And that's a difficult dance that developers wouldn't have to do if they were just allowed to make an entirely new game. Thankfully, there is much fun to be had here, particularly if you're planning on playing with friends or if you're just in it for the nostalgia trip. It definitely has its bright spots as a remaster, but as a 2019 game, mediocre customization and some design philosophies that really just have no place in 2019 do create a bit of a perfect storm that does relegate the game to a somewhat uncomfortable place where it manages to stay above average, but not by much.
No sweat.